Bless your fans. Welcome in to the Bless Your Victory podcast. Your host, Tom Duncan, Simi Marion, and w- recording audio only, Darian Smith. um, this episode is brought to you by Cahaba Brewing Company. Uh, Pick you up a six pack of Cahaba Blonde and um make sure to go to cahababrewing.com.
Nailed
Folks,
it, bro. Nailed it. Good
uh
job, man.
come back to uh Alice Mortensen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
And I know we got to speak a little bit earlier, but it's great seeing you back on here.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we are extremely excited for this episode. Alex, thank you so much for coming on the Blazer Victory podcast. We hope this is not the last time we'll see you on the show. But yeah, we were really excited this time of the year as we're getting ready for spring camp. We wanted to take this opportunity just to kind of, get on and record an episode and just kind of ask you how things are going. So I guess spring camp started officially last Wednesday, I think it was. So only a couple of practices in thus far, but just how are things going and how excited are you to get back on the field?
Yeah, I think things are going well. We're three practices in. The first two were in helmets, and we finally put shoulder pads on today. And I think the first thing is the coaching staff and players, everybody's working really hard. I think guys are putting in a lot of effort. I think practice has been well organized, been pleased with our staff, and I think the effort and tempo has been really good. We still have a long way to go. We have a lot of work to do. And with so many new players, we're evaluating a lot of guys. And so in addition to teaching them, we're doing a lot of evaluating and figuring out what do they do best and what positions do they play best and then what schemes are they going to fit into the best as well. So obviously we recruited them and felt like we had to know a lot about them, but that evaluation process is going to continue through the spring. But we're first three practices under our belt. I think we're off to a good start.
Love it. What's kind of just like the general like schedule and plan, like the progression of spring camp, like how many practices total? Just for those of our listeners that maybe not in the day to day, like just what does that look like rest of spring camp?
Yeah, we're going to have, 15 total practices. That's what you're allowed. And so we've done three. So we still have another 12 to do. And you've got to have, a certain amount of them in helmets only. And then a lot of them you can have shoulder pads on. And then we'll tackle for some of them too. So, and there's limitations on that. So there's a little bit of blend of different kinds of practices through the way. But our philosophy this year is to try to spread it out. We're new staff, you have a lot of new players, and so we want guys to have the opportunity to be able to digest the information in between from the last practice and make the corrections and watch the film, and then also have time to digest the next install. So you kind of almost get 2 days on it. They know what we're putting in the next day before we get there. I think that helps them. So we're trying to go slow and spread it out. You can do a lot with those 15 practices. You can cram them into 3 weeks. You can spread them out. We're spreading them out a little bit more.
Well, I heard you had a special guest, I think, at today's practice. I think our own Darian Smith. Were you able to evaluate how he looked on the field? Did you get any reps from him? What was that like?
We didn't get any reps, but I'll say this: he passes the eyeball test. He
Yeah.
definitely looks like he could get out there and still play. We'd take him.
No, I would definitely pull a hamstring. I have a question. Let's stick with evaluation. So you're the head guy now, and this is a new age of football with so many new faces. So with you being a new head coach, and how does that evaluation process look for you? Because you're also evaluating coaches, if I'm not mistaken. There's so many new coaches on the staff, so many new players, so many new positions. I mean, how do you organize the evaluation process in this role that you're in now?
Well, I think you've got to have a really, well-structured organization, where you've obviously, as a head coach, you've got to have, strong coordinators or people that kind of act in that role on both sides of the ball. And then and of course, we also have a recruiting department too. And so I think everyone kind of, working underneath those umbrellas, has got to do a good job. And a lot of our coaches have got an area, they have a position that they recruit. And, we have a process where, we're going to try to get multiple eyes on every prospect. And then, it kind of gets worked up the chain. Um, so we do have a process there in which, how we grade players, what we're looking for. And then, you mentioned this, the coaching thing too. I think it's important, that, we coach our coaches and that we all kind of know what we're looking for. But at the same time too, we hired a lot of these guys for a reason too, because we feel like, they're going to do a really good job and in the role they're in. So there's a balance there of kind of trusting people to do their job and then giving them, feedback periodically. But it is important, I think, I've always been pretty tied to the quarterback position and want to stay close to that position. I think it's one of my strengths. So I want to do the things I do well and probably stay away from the things I don't do as well. But I don't want to have tunnel vision where we can still see our coaching staff working during practice and get eyes on other positions, so we can evaluate those things. And then, the great thing about football is we have the film. So whatever I miss live, if we have two fields working simultaneously, we'll get it on film. Or if we have three drills going simultaneously, I have an opportunity to watch all the film later.
So, Coach, this is your fourth spring camp, if I'm thinking right, at UAB, but your first, as Darian just stated, as the head coach. I'm kind of curious, like, how will this version of spring camp maybe look different than in prior years? I'm sure you've learned a lot of great things, as the offensive coordinator going through spring camp the past 3 years. But just how different may this spring camp look in terms of, you putting maybe your tweaks on like schedules or objectives or things of that sort?
Yeah, I think every year you're in coaching, I think you keep learning. And it's fortunate to, have been here for 3 years and, working on offense. And there are things I learned through that. And there's also things I feel like I learned through 9 years at Alabama, under Nick Saban. I think there's things I learned also at New Mexico Highlands, which was a Division II program where we had a very short timetable to get a team ready because most of our team showed up after the 4th of July. And then I also coached in the AAF where Joe Pendry was our general manager. Tim Lewis was our head coach. I worked with the offensive coordinator named Steve Logan. And that was another experience where we had a very short timetable. You basically had a month. You had a little mini camp, then you had a month you had to go play. And this kind of sits somewhere in between. It sits somewhere in between of having your traditional 4 or 5 year program that I think we all grew up with, where guys were in your program a long time, and then the freshmen would assimilate into it, maybe a transfer or two, and then kind of that extreme example that I mentioned of maybe my Division II experience or my AAF experience where we had a really tight timetable. But I think you've got to kind of figure out, okay, how do we teach to this group? When we've got maybe not as long as we used to have. So there are some things schedule wise and just even from a teaching standpoint that we're going to implement that we think will hopefully give us an advantage that might be different than how we've done things in years past.
So I'm gonna kind of stay right there. I know you was talking about, you're close to that quarterback position, and I know you're putting your kind of tweaks on how you want your spring to be coordinated. But as for Ryder, Ryder was a guy that, we had the two quarterback system last year. But now I believe, and you can clarify, but I certainly believe he's coming into this year that he's the guy, right? Um, and I'm trying to avoid this being hot takey right now, but just kind of what are some things what are your expectations? I think there are big expectations of Ryder. Everybody remembers the Memphis game and the high that he's able to create. But as far as like consistency, what are you looking for to seeing? What are you looking forward to seeing in his development over the spring and over the fall and heading into the year?
Yeah, well, great question. And I think, first of all, just in terms of the situation, I think Ryder has earned the right to go out first. And I think he's kind of earned the right to take the first reps. And to this point, and then we're really excited about all the quarterbacks we have on the roster. Nate Rogers has done a really good job and is developing. We used him in some packages last year, and we're kind of letting him grow into being able to run the whole offense. And then he still has some things he can do on top of that. You have Adrian Posse, who's coming into a third year that is also developing. You have Cam Jennings, who's a local guy that has a lot of talent. So all these guys are getting reps and developing, but I do think Ryder's earned the opportunity to go out there first. We really, really high on Ryder, really like him a lot. He's got great leadership skills. He's intelligent. He's hardworking. I think he's got a lot of really good physical traits as well. In terms of what do we expect from him, we have incredibly high expectations. We expect them to play very, very well. Particularly, yeah, there'll be things with the offense that will grow and change and tweak, but it's our second year working together. So the expectations are really high. They're really high. And, everything he does pre-snap to post-snap decisions are really high. And then off the field, we expect him to conduct himself in a really positive manner, affect his teammates positively, be a great student. I mean, just everything. I feel like quarterback is an all-encompassing endeavor, and that's what we expect of him. When we talk about those expectations being high, you go back and look at the history of this offense, and the offense tweaks. It grows and changes every year based on who we have, but it's a very flexible system. But you look at, this is interesting. You look at the top 10 completion percentage leaders for single season in the history of college football. At least these stats start in 1956. I think number one or tied for first is Mac Jones, who played in this system. And then 10th, okay, is actually Jacob Zeno, okay, his 2023 at UAB. So, we feel like we have a system that can help quarterbacks develop and help them be productive and give them an opportunity. So we expect a lot of these guys. We really do.
Just sticking with the conversation around like Ryder Burton right now, I can speak from personal experience, having met Ryder. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting many players, but I did have an opportunity to meet Ryder. He is extremely professional and just seems like an absolute great guy. Comes from a good family, it sounds like, and so. I had met him a little bit early, and that's awesome. But when you guys were talking about Ryder, it made me kind of think about. I think it was after the Memphis game. I don't remember the exact quote, but he had said something along the lines of that he was kind of, hitching himself to you. Like he had credit to you. Like he was basically like, I'm riding with Coach Mort. What did that mean to you, like in that moment? Now you've had time to reflect. Like what was that like hearing that from your quarterback?
Yeah, it meant a lot. I mean, again, I really like Ryder a lot, and I think our whole building does. And so it meant a lot to have that kind of loyalty and support from him, especially at that time. And I think he really appreciates getting coached and he likes learning. And I think we have a great relationship. He loves talking football. He's in the building all the time, so meant a lot. And I think it also just kind of speaks to the kind of relationship we have too. I mean, I get phone calls from the guy all the time, wants to know about a rep at practice or how to read something. So he's been a joy to work with. And, we talk about a quarterback, you want to have the game of a player, but the mind of a coach. And when you have that kind of relationship and someone that's that eager, it gives you an opportunity to be able to try to create that kind of coach on the field a little bit in terms of how he sees the game and getting him to think our thoughts and see it the way we see it. So it meant a lot, but I also, like I said, I think it's indicative of kind of our relationship too.
Um, and one more personnel question for me. So it was a lot of publicity around the three running backs we signed, right?
Right.
Three productive, good looking running backs. I was able to see Robinson today in person and looked like he actually cut some weight and he just looks so explosive. I did not expect that from a big back. I'm excited. But what exactly had me really excited was seeing Marquise Collins. That's it. He looks explosive. And I'm thinking like how is this like I've heard of three-headed monsters, but is it will UAB be going into the year with four good-looking, dependable running backs, and how do you split that up?
Yeah, I think it's very possible we can. I really like all these backs from, Javen Simpkins to, Bam to Roderick to Marquise. I think, they're all really, really good players, have the potential to be great players. And, that's a good thing. It's a position that, does historically get banged up a lot, and professional football has a shorter shelf life. So we like having a lot of guys, and we think it creates competition too. And I think competition can bring out the best in guys. And I think we can find ways to get multiple backs on the field at a time too. So there's ways to play with 2 and 3 backs in the game. If so, I think it's a good thing. And I think it is, yes, to answer your question, I think it's possible we could have four really viable backs. And I'll say this too, I want to give Amari Brundage a little bit of a love here because, Amari's been a guy that has been a part of our program that's done a really good job in practice. And, I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to compete and play a role for us too. I really do.
Coach, I don't know if you saw it, but last week there was a post that went somewhat viral, like on X. It was in response to a by the numbers post from the UAB football account, and it was regarding high school recruitment. Let's just say that Darian wasn't holding back punches. So if you did see it, Darian was on there holding the
Yeah,
fort.
I'm sorry. I can get a little passionate sometimes. So I
Yeah,
was fighting on our behalf. I don't like misinformation. That's all.
yeah,
So I
Yeah.
digress.
Yeah, Darian knows because we've heard you in interviews before. Talk about high school recruitment and philosophy. It was back during the end of the season. I remember there was, speaking of viral, like you had a photo of you on the sideline, like at a high school football game that got like a lot of love on it. So we know how you feel about high school, Alabama high school recruiting, regional high school recruitment. But I wanted just to kind of give like an opportunity just to like hear from you again for those that might be tuning in to listen to you for the first time. Like, just what is like your general philosophy as it relates to high school recruitment? What is going to be your approach? Even though I guess it was this past cycle we signed 8 high school signees, but just wanted to give you like an opportunity to kind of speak to that high level.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking the question. And I'll say this, we have a great sports information department here. We have a great marketing department. We have great recruiting. So people here. So, we have a phenomenal organization, but I think that thing that got put out really did lack context in a pretty big way. And so, I think they're trying to highlight like all the guys we took and all that. But,
Mhm.
like we don't really want to promote the fact that we took, 8 high school players. That's not something I want to promote. That's not what
Mhm.
we're trying to do. And, we, just to go back to, in terms of timeline, I was the interim head coach here and then didn't really get named the head coach till after that, December signing date kind of eclipsed. And so we were
Mhm.
kind of through it. So it was a little bit difficult to recruit to the program when you're in an interim position. I think we did a fairly good job, and I like a lot of the guys I'd like all the guys we took during that time period. But our objective, so at that point, I do want to, before I even answer some of those questions, so at that point, then, now we've got the February signing that's still out there. So we spent the better part of December, evaluating high school football players, in conjunction with maybe guys that you're anticipating could be out there in the portal, but we really spent a lot of time on high school to make sure that, no one fell through the cracks. So that's important to us. It's really important. And so in terms of philosophy, we want to be able to recruit more high school players. I think there's a great radius here. Talked about this a lot, the 4 or 5 hour radius around Birmingham of high school football. When you take Birmingham itself and really the state of Alabama, you go to Georgia, go down I-20 to Atlanta. In West Georgia, you go down to South Georgia, up to Nashville, East Mississippi, the Panhandle, Florida. I mean, there's a lot of great football players here. So we really want to recruit high school players because one of the things we like is we like the idea of being able to develop players. I had opportunities to get in the NFL early in my career. And I was really excited about the idea of coaching in college. This was obviously before the transfer portal because I like the idea of coaching and developing guys over a longer period of time. So that's what we hope to do, is to be able to tilt the percentage a little bit more towards high school. I'm not going to put a hard number on it. I think every year is different. So I'm not going to say, hey, it's going to be, X amount high school, X amount portal, X amount JUCO. I think every year is different. And at the same time, because of the transfer portal, I think we need to make sure we don't settle. If we're taking a high school guy, we shouldn't settle on a guy. We should take guys we really want because you have the opportunity to go take players in the portal and young players in the portal. And so if you do look at some of the portal guys we took, we conscientiously try to take some young guys if we could, and you really maybe would have liked to even taken more. So we have an opportunity to work with them hopefully over a longer period of time as well. So that's kind of the idea. Now in terms of inviting kids to camps, because people talk about that too. Well, why do you guys invite people to camp and all that? And I want to tell a story about this. I'm going to tell 2 stories. So when I was coaching at New Mexico Highlands, which was one of my first jobs, Division II program, I got out there. I couldn't believe the quality of quarterbacks we had there, the talent we had. Over a year, I had 4 guys that I'm telling you, they were really, really talented, had really live arms. One of them, ended up that I had an opportunity to coach, ended up second in the country in total offense, a guy named Emmanuel Lewis. And then a guy I recruited did the same thing after Emmanuel graduated. I think he was first or second in the country in total offense, Lance Orender. And then there were two other guys that were incredibly talented, and Corey Lockman, Taylor Geneser. But anyway, I was kind of amazed by that. And then I started thinking about it. Tony Romo went to Eastern Illinois out of high school and kind of fell through the cracks. And then so did Jimmy Garoppolo. And then Carson Wentz, wasn't a power, a Division I football player out of high school. And we could go on and on and on. About guys that fall through the cracks or maybe get missed. And so, anyway, that leads me to this next story. I'm at the University of Alabama. This is summer 2021. All right. And, I'm watching the quarterbacks play. Now, look, we invite guys to camp. We also let people show up too, and they can just pay and show up. And there's a guy we didn't invite. And I'm going, man, this guy's pretty good. Got a live arm, quick release, accurate, built well, tall. And I keep watching him. Very consistent. Didn't fall apart as the day went on. If anything, he got stronger. And we had stickers on the back of their helmet with their last name. And I'm going, well, let me see who this is. And I go, Mendoza. Huh. Mendoza. So after camp's over, I go up and I'd started working with him, talked to him, but I went out of my way to really speak to him afterwards. And he goes, yeah, I'm, from the Miami area. I said, well, what do you have going on in recruiting? He goes, well, right now, FIU is talking to me. I haven't offered, and I'm getting some Ivy League action because I've got good grades. And so I'm going, man, I think you're pretty good. And, at that time we had Ty Simpson, we're pretty far down the line with Ty Simpson, said, look, my old coach, David Lee, who coached me in college, he's retired. He's in Miami. He's in the Fort Lauderdale area. I think you ought to start working with him. And I think David's got a lot of connections. He might be able to help you. Well, anyway, I start recruiting this kid, Fernando Mendoza, to be a preferred walk-on at Alabama. And I'm thinking, man, we're going to get the steal of the century here. And so, he still is, we have a chance to get him. We get all the way into January, and one of David's old friends is coaching at Cal. And so David got him to come down and watch him throw in person in January. And I remember Fernando's father texted me, goes, hey, we just got a full offer from Cal. And on one hand, I'm happy for him. On the other hand, I'm going, doggone it. I said, I thought you might have had one stowed away here. Now, the reason I tell that story too is, I'm not going to feel guilty about inviting a bunch of kids to camp either when we start talking about high school kids. Look, no one's entitled to anything. No high school player, no high school coach, they're not entitled to anything. But we'll give them an opportunity. If you want to show up and compete, then show up and compete. And if you don't, then stay home. So, that's the other part of this too, is like, we want to, it's important to us. We like seeing players in person. I think it's, and obviously we're going to try to get out in May. You mentioned us getting out on the road. We're going to try to get out in May and see as many guys in person as we can to evaluate them live. And my point is I want to make sure we turn over because of my experience at Highlands, because I think about the Tony Romos, the Garoppolos, the guys that fall through the cracks, my experience with a guy like Fernando Mendoza. I want to turn over every rock we can. And I won't, I have another story to tell, which I'll save maybe for another time. But I had very similar experience with Brock Purdy, with very, very similar deal, where he wasn't getting a lot of action and we kind of fell into that. And so my point is we're going to turn over rocks. And so, and try to find, the best players we can, but we can only take so many. And like going back to what I said, because we do have the portal, we're not going to settle either though. We want to take the best players we can.
Oh yeah, I like that. I save all the stories for BBP. We can do this every week if you want to. I love the stories, man. And so a little off the rails, but just sticking to it. And I just want to know an opinion on this. This has nothing to do with any set of questions, but I've been wondering about this. It's like, do you truly believe that you can really develop in this day and age? And that's just I just want to know your thoughts on this because I'm honestly I'm kind of cynical on that. I just think that from what I'm hearing, players are kind of prioritizing the bag. And I know you can probably speak to that more than me, but I just don't know if it's truly possible to develop a player in this day and age without them getting an offer from a P4 school.
Well, I think the development thing, the short answer is I do believe you can develop players. I think the question is the timetable. And I'd almost compare it to this. Say you're an Olympic athlete, right? You're going to compete to go to the Olympics. on a 4-year cycle. Okay, but inside 4 years, you're going to have annual cycles inside that, right? 4 annual cycles, 4 1-year cycles. And during that time, you're also going to have some shorter cycles in that. You might have some meets, every 3 months or whatever. So you're going to have like these little peaks where you're going to train and try to compete, maybe on a shorter timetable. And then maybe you try to make it to the national championships at the end of the year. And then over time, you're hoping ultimately to create a great peak, at the end of 4 years. So my point is, if we have a guy that gets to us for 1 year, we're going to do everything we can to develop him in that year. And I do believe you can develop inside a year. I think a lot of people right now are so fixated on just recruiting and just coaching scheme, and the idea of developing players kind of gets lost. I mentioned earlier, it's part of why I wanted to get into coaching and college coaching. And it's one of the big impressions that Nick Saban left on me is, hey, football is a developmental game, and we've got to develop guys fundamentally and develop inside our scheme. So I think we can develop guys even on a shorter timetable. Now, that being said, I think the opportunity for development is greater when you have them over a longer period of time in your system, in your offense, in your coaching or defense or special team system. So I would prefer to have guys for a longer timetable. I think it helps tremendously. And I think to your point about the financial part, look, I think it's great players are getting paid, but it used to really be a little bit more about guys delaying gratification for, hey, getting a degree. And then also, let's see how much I can develop wherever I'm at. And maybe I'll have an opportunity to play professionally. I think it's great we can help them a little bit more in the short term, but we don't want to lose sight of, hey, some longer term development in this climate too.
Let's talk a little bit about the defensive side of the ball and some of the additions. So lots of new players and, also on the coaching staff for on the defensive side of the ball. Talk to us a little bit about Todd Grantham. So maybe a little bit about his background, but also just what is his personality like, on and off the field? Because, I'll just speak for myself. I love the transfer portal from like a fan perspective because it's like just so much drama and there's so much action going on, like, offers and visits and all this stuff. And then you had these big weekends with lots of visitors. And Todd Grantham in particular had dropped several like posts. It looked like they were like celebratory posts, like he's drinking a Michelob Ultra at the end of the day, or he's just doing his hell yeah with a lot of fire emojis or whatever he's doing. But he just seems like a really energetic guy. But just from your perspective, working with him directly, for those that don't know Todd, maybe just share a little bit of information about him. But just what's his personality like on and off the field? Does it match his social media persona?
Yeah, Coach Grantham, one, I think he's a passionate football coach. I think he loves the game. I think he loves scheme. I think he loves fundamentals. He loves developing players. So that is absolutely who he is. And I think we feel it, every day in the building. We feel it at practice. And, he's got a lot of energy. He's very demanding of our players and in the best way possible to bring out the best in them. And one of the things I really like about him is he really does like the chess match part of the game. He likes scheme. And so I've enjoyed a lot of those conversations we've had too, kicking ideas back and forth and, things that they're looking at doing and things that he's done, that he's also played against that has been challenging too. So, man, he's got great energy, and I think it is contagious. I think it permeates. It goes to the rest of the staff, and that really the defense, and then consequently that ratchets it up for the offense to have to step up and compete at a higher level too.
How much do you think it helps with, his background, like in the SEC, big programs, a defensive coordinator, just as we talk about those visits and trying to attract talent to UAB, or schools like UAB, like how much do you think that helped, like his experience in the SEC? And obviously you have a lot of experience in the SEC too, but is that kind of, does that help as a selling point? We're talking earlier about money, but outside of that, it's just like, how much does that come into play?
Look, I think players, get attracted to people that can help them, most of the time. And that's really our job as coaches, is to serve and help our players. And I think, with Todd's background and a lot of the coaches on our staff, is we have a lot of people here that have the ability to help and develop players going forward. And, Todd's got, a number of guys that he's helped, play in the National Football League. And so I think that can be a really good selling point, and his ability to teach and develop and get the most out of players. So it absolutely is a selling point, and for him and for some other guys on our staff too. But I certainly think his experiences really help him. They help him a lot.
defensively, just sticking with on defense, just personnel wise, what I saw today, it looked like a bigger, sturdier, lengthy team. Was that absolutely uh, a point of priority, just trying to get a bigger, stronger team, position, not just in the trenches, but positional size as well?
Yeah, I think first of all, in the trenches, talking about that and the line of scrimmage, I think is incredibly important. It's hard to win in football when you don't control the line of scrimmage well on either side of the ball. So we definitely did want to create, some size and some length, at those positions. And, there certainly is some value to having length in the back end too. But you've also got to have athleticism to go with it. And so that's something you're always trying to balance. And obviously you'd like to have both if you can and not trade one for the other. But yes, we did want to get bigger and longer, but especially up front, especially up front.
Coach, I've kind of got like a random question, like a look back question. I was thinking about, having this opportunity to talk to you today, and I was kind of thinking back to your 6 game stint as the interim head coach. And during that 6 games, like there were some highs in the first outing. You knock off a rival team. I think they were ranked in the top 25 at the time, in the first game as interim head coach. Then you bookended that on the final game of the season by I think it was a 17 game road losing streak that you had snapped. As you just kind of had time this offseason, maybe if there was ever a point in which you were able just to sit down and kind of think back to that experience from those 6 games, like which of those were like that you were most proud of in terms of like an accomplishment, or was it something else like during those 6 game stint that stands out to you?
Well, I think one, I mean, I've tried to, if anything, reflect back to learn, see what we can learn from the things we did well, and also, adjust the things that we need to do better. And, there are a multitude of things in both categories. I think the big takeaway to me, I mean, there are a number of them, but I think one collectively, the group put the team first. And yeah, everyone's going to have individual goals, and we want to help our players accomplish their individual goals. But when we became more of a team first operation, I think we played our best. And when we got distracted by other things, we didn't. And so I think that's really important that we emphasize that going forward, that we recruit guys that are bought into that mentality, and that's what we want to create, culturally while they're here, and really not tolerate anything else. That is one of the biggest things. And yes, the Memphis game was a big win for us, playing a top 25 undefeated team, and beating them, in that manner was great. And, at the same time too, I would have liked us, I thought we had opportunities to really kind of put them away and make it a multiple score game. So I think there's some things to learn from there. And then I think the Tulsa game, was a challenging game because we were missing, almost 40 players when we were on the road there. And it would have been easy for a lot of people to say, well, maybe this is the end of it. And we fought. It was also very windy too. For those of you that weren't there, it's a very, very windy. So there were 2 quarters of the game. It was actually really tough to throw the ball. So, I was really pleased with, how we played defensively, created 2 turnovers, had a big stop in a short yardage situation, and guys played really hard. We had some offensive guys actually playing on defense, took reps on the defensive line, and quarterback played pretty efficient. I think we ended up 14 to 17 in a game where we really couldn't throw it much and ran the ball pretty well. So, but ultimately, kind of the spirit and sentiment of that group that got on the plane was, man, it was about the team. It was about team first. It was about UAB, about, all those things. And so, and really about each other, playing for each other. So that's kind of what I take away. And I hope we can, actually now make that a kind of a core value going forward.
Speaking about the team, we get a lot of questions from the fans saying, "What's the best thing that we can do to support this program as a fan?" So coming from you, what do you think as UAB fans, as we want to generate as much optimism, um, just as much good good juju for this team going forward, and out for your first year at the helm? What
Yeah.
should what are the things can the fans do this year to help support the team?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. And first of all, I want to just say I want to thank our fans and for their interest and their passion. Okay, the first thing I'd say is this, a lot of positive energy. I think positive energy and positive talk. I think don't underestimate I would encourage people not to underestimate what that can do. And also not underestimate what negative talk can do. Now, I know a lot of that times when people get negative, it's fueled by their passion. It's fueled by how they want our program to be great. And believe me, they have a high standard. We have an incredibly high standard for ourselves. But I think the more positive we can be, hey, even if you're one of these people that post online, post on social media, you comment, look, you don't know what recruit's going to read that, what recruits' parents, what current players' parents are going to read that. You might be surprised. You really might. And so I think creating a lot of positive energy around the program is really important. And then also, out in the community too, because again, those things spread. And again, you don't know how it's going to affect recruiting and how it's going to affect the program. The second thing is I'd say come to the games. The better turnout we can get, better experience we can get, I think it helps our team, helps our players, and bring people with you. See if we can get more people to the games. Obviously, we want to have success, so people want to get to the games, but being as positive as we can towards our players, encouraging them during the game, I think that's another area people can really help us. And then, and so I wanted to say those first two things because, I know everyone may not have the financial means to just go donate, all right, or it may not make sense for your personal situation. But I would say if you are in position to, if you donate to our Excellence Fund, it does help, really does help. And every little bit helps, if it's, you might think it's a small amount, it's probably not. So I hate to pass the offering played out on the podcast, but those are really the three big things to me: staying positive, get to the games, cheer loud, be positive while you're there, and then if you have the opportunity, making a little donation to our Excellence Fund, or maybe a big donation for that matter. But those things can really help us a lot.
As we look ahead to this next season, from a scheduling standpoint, we've got somewhat of a unique thing for us because ever since the return, we've had a Thursday night opener. And this would be the first year in quite some time, certainly since you've been at UAB, in which we don't open with a Thursday night game. We go on the road against a Power Four opponent in Illinois. I don't think that you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know how much coaches have to say as it relates to football scheduling. So, not necessarily about whether you like the decision or not. But what do you just kind of think about that dynamic of a change? And then, ultimately, does that change anything as it relates to like prep during like fall camp? Are we not even at that point yet? I'm just curious, like how that dynamic may impact things from your standpoint.
Yeah, really, in terms of fall camp, you have to count backwards from your first game as to when you can start it, basically. So it does affect the start of camp. Does it affect how many practices you can get? No, it does not. And then I think the second effect is now the second game, whether or not you have the traditional Saturday to Saturday turnaround or the Thursday to Saturday turnaround. So either way, you got to manage that well. There's this is a schedule, I didn't have a lot of say in, and it really doesn't matter. My one thing in my last boss, coach, or one of my last bosses, Coach Saban used to say all the time, and sometimes it's not your job to judge. And I kind of feel like this falls in that category. It's not really my job to judge the schedule, just my job to manage it. So I'm not going to worry about what it is. We just got to figure out, let's build the best plan possible to deal with, what's on the schedule and the dates and the manner in which, the games lay out and how much time we have between them.
So we're obviously Darren, John, myself. We're all doing this podcast because like we love UAB. Like we just diehards. Darian played at UAB, and then John and I are fans. I went to UAB for school. And so just speaking for myself personally, like it, just to speak to you, like it means a lot that I can sense like from you that you value UAB as like an institution and like you see the speaking about positive talks, like you see like what could be at UAB because I know that we all three and the people in this podcast feel very much the same, but it seems very genuine. I just appreciate having, you in the head coaching seat. And when you talk about how much you think that how much potential is in UAB, like I believe you. And that just means a lot. And I think that's kind of why, whether it's us or like the fan base, like we're so behind you and like we're so rooting for you, and not just you, but the whole team. But it's just really nice to sense that you actually do see the potential in UAB that exists.
Well, look, I mean, that's two ways because I really appreciate, the support that we have. And look, I grew up in Georgia. My mom's from the state of Alabama. I love it here. I love Birmingham, the city, the area, the greater Birmingham area. I lived about an hour from here for a long time, so I've really enjoyed it here. This is exactly where I want to be. And then in the institution, I think what UAB, UAB is a great institution. I mean, you talk about the success it's had, how much, really, frankly, how much money it's generated, the medical success, the academic success, and really look, I mean, Dr. Watts has done an incredible job here over the last decade, with the school. So it's really a neat place. And I really do feel like we really feel like we can be, build a really good program here, if not a great program. And I think one, we have a great place to recruit to. This is a big time program, in a big time city. And so I think it's incredibly attractive. We talked about how good the recruiting radius is earlier. I think that's a tremendous advantage. And, Dr. Watts, has been awesome since, I've been on the job here. So we've got great support there. Our athletic department, um, and administration has been great as well. I think you guys have talked to Mark Ingram and have had him on. So, I think those things are outstanding. And then, so I think the ceiling's high. Now, look, we have a lot of work to do. We've got to keep competing, working to compete, and we can't be naive. I think, we all, I think a lot of people probably have nostalgia about, some of the success we've had here at UAB in the past. And I have a ton of respect for the success that's been had, but it was also a lot of it was pre-portal, it was pre-NIL. And so that's not saying, well, let's make excuses, but it's saying, hey, if we want to compete, we have to adapt. You adapt or you die. And so we have to find ways to adapt, to the current set of circumstances. It's different. We're in a different conference, different portal or new portal, and we're dealing with NIL and rev share. So we can't do it the way we did it in the past if we want to have success. And so we're going to have to be creative and intelligent and have a plan and be analytical about how we're going to approach this. But I do believe we can be very, very good. We're playing in a tough conference. It's very competitive. But I think we can answer the challenge. I really do. And it's going to take, work inside of our building and outside of our building to get that done. But I can't tell you how thrilled I am and grateful I am to be where I'm at. I really am. And I'm grateful to have the staff we have too doing it with us.
And when we talk about the positivity and the genuineness, I think that's where it starts from because you're the leader of this that what we want to create here, and I do think that you exude that honesty, that genuineness, and I think it flows from the top down, right? So it'll flow from you into the players, into the locker room, into the fan base. So like Jimmy said, we really appreciate you, and I for myself, I really thank you for your time and we just need some more of those stories. So save those stories. I'm looking forward to hearing them.
You got it. I'll hold on to them. And yeah, look, I mean, I know you guys are diehards. I just appreciate the interest you guys generate, with the fan base too. It's awesome.
Last question for you, and then we'll wrap this up is what can you share with us about the plan for the spring showcase? We know at the conclusion of spring camp, we're going to have an event there, I believe at Legacy Pavilion, but we definitely want to, speaking of support, we want to have fans encouraged to come out, support the players and say hello to the staff and all that good stuff. So what can you share with us quickly about, I think it's Saturday, April the 18th, I believe is the date, but what would you like to share about that?
Yeah, it's Saturday, April 18th. It'll be, probably around 10 a.m. plus or minus. We'll have a lot going on for families and kids and things of that nature. And then, also still gives you an opportunity to go out, have a day after too, and spend time with our players. It will very likely at this point, the plan is to have a typical scrimmage format. We probably won't split up into teams based on the roster size, but it'll probably be a little bit more offense against defense, and we'll roll through different players. But look, we're looking to get out and get some work in too and get better. And yeah, it'll also be a continuation of our evaluation process with the guys we have. So that's what you can expect right now. If that changes, obviously we'll let you know. But that's our current plan, and we would love to see a bunch of fans there. That would be really exciting. I know it'd mean a lot to our players, and we'd love to be able to see and interact with you guys.
Love it. Okay, y'all heard Coach Mort. Saturday, April the 18th. They're going to have the spring showcase. Make sure you show out. Again, thank you so much, Coach Mortensen, for coming on the podcast. We hope that we're going to, see you again later in the future to talk maybe how spring goes and maybe at some point during the summer.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
All right, listeners, thank y'all so much for tuning in today. Make sure you like and subscribe. Shout out to Big Jim, and we hope y'all have a good rest of your week. And as always, go Blazers.
Go